you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description.
Welcome to MINDSHOCK. This is Bruce McGuire.
And Maxwell Powers.
And JR.
And we are going over the top Men in Black encounters in history. Once again, if you like the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel and hit the bell notification to receive notifications when we upload new podcasts. And you could also check us out on social media, Reddit, Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. Just check the link in the description. So I've actually gone in depth into the Men in Black, the government organization allegedly responsible for keeping extraterrestrial contact and any kind of UFO or alien evidence under wraps and intimidating witnesses into silence, sometimes by physical means of either drugging or some kind of advanced technology. They were prominently featured in the Mothman case of Point Pleasant, West Virginia. And they're really bizarre. I mean, John Keel is probably the first UFO researcher to bring them into prominence and write about them. Before that, it's kind of disputed when the Men in Black were even formed. I mean, we have JR here who supposedly worked for a government agency, but he won't tell us which one. I think he was probably just a janitor somewhere, and he's not going to confirm or deny, are you, JR?
No, not at all. I mean, as far as you're concerned, I may or may not have wiped the floor of the CIA. That's as far as I'm going with that.
How do we know you just weren't a janitor for the Park Service and you just worked some shed and you overheard some stuff?
Maybe I did. Maybe I was.
What do you think, Maxwell? Do you find JR credible? Maxwell?
Oh, I really don't care.
I said he's credible in a previous video, by the way. So, I mean,
it's a good thing you're on this
burns.
It's a good thing you're on this podcast, Maxwell.
That burns. I mean,
you really keep up to date on everything.
I spent like 2 minutes talking about how credible you were in the previous video. So, I mean, that burns. But I'll sell the beer with you.
So basically, some people think the Men in Black were formed shortly after the Roswell incident in 1947 in New Mexico, one of the most famous alleged UFO crashes. Some witnesses claim to have even seen alien bodies. I'm sure most people are familiar with the Roswell crash. What are your thoughts on Roswell, JR?
Well, I mean, Roswell was a very interesting episode. I mean, after all, the United States government, they played it off like it was these weather balloons that flew off course, and after all, it became this whole thing. But I mean, let's put it into context. After all, Area 51, which is no longer called Area 51, by the way, was denied that it even existed for a period of time. I mean, much like many installations within the same spectrum or the same area of space that it is today. So it's interesting that the government denies all knowledge, but after all, do you really believe that weather balloons can produce this type? I mean, there are actually cafes, hotels, and bars that call themselves Area 51 just because of the stigma that arises around this particular incident. This is before my time. This is before I was born, but obviously it created quite a stir because, I mean, to this day, there's still stuff going on around this particular area. And to be called simply a aircraft testing base, which is the ultimate explanation that the military came up with, I don't know necessarily if I find that credible because, I mean, there's a lot of tested aircraft, but keep in mind that, most tested aircraft is tested by the manufacturer off-site before it ever reaches the federal government.
Maxwell, what's your take on Roswell?
I don't know, just the place where all the UFOs land. I don't know.
All of them.
Well, not all of them. I just know it as a UFO place.
Well, do you think the claims are warranted? Is there any truth to it? What's your opinion on it? Is it just a whole bunch of hogwash and mass hallucination?
I don't know. I just saw TV shows on it. I don't know that much about it. I just know there's a lot
Undecided.
of aliens.
So you're undecided.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've done a little bit of research on Roswell a while ago. I mean, there were actual memos between government agents. I mean, if you look at the original news reports, that was before they engaged in the conspiracy of silence. They were actually relatively open, like the U.S. military. If you look at the first news reports within the first 24 hours, they're pretty astounding. They're not hiding anything. And then,
Well, the U.S. military is always open about stuff until like it becomes a matter of public interest,
well,
and
yeah,
then all of a
within
sudden,
24 hours, the conspiracy of silence begins, and all the stories start to change. It's actually quite
right? Of
interesting.
course.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because from that point on, after Roswell, there was never any period of honesty ever again. I mean, the cover up and the fix was in. So some people think that all aliens, the whole extraterrestrial field of the paranormal, is simply one big hoax. I'm not. Once again, I'm kind of like a fence sitter. I look at different sides of different arguments and examine their veracity here on Mind Shock. We
Well,
go.
I mean, like let's look at it this way, Bruce. At the very least, Area 51 is shifty business for the government. Otherwise, like, why would they spend billions of dollars, like, trying to like dissuade the American people from trying to be involved with what's
Well,
going on there?
they denied its existence for so many years before finally admitting it. I mean, I don't know why some of these, once again, like some of the American public is so easily fooled. They just lap up everything, and then when they finally admit it exists, they're just like, "Oh, okay," and then they continue believing everything again. It's kind of weird. But let's focus on the Men in Black here. So some people think that the Men in Black agency was formed from Roswell on to contain any kind of knowledge or evidence. So let's look at the timeline real quick before we get into the most famous encounters. So in the 1950s and 1960s, a lot of ufologists started believing in this conspiracy theory that involved the United States government. Because before that, it's kind of difficult to teleport yourself into the mentality of someone walking around in the 1930s, the 1940s, the 1950s. This was before the whole tobacco industry conspiracy was exposed. Because back then, the government said cigarettes were safe. Like pretty much everything the government said, most people believed it. They had no reason to doubt it back then. But these ufologists were kind of ahead of their time, where they kind of theorized that the U.S. government was involved in covering up evidence of aliens, UFOs, extraterrestrials, and whatnot for whatever reason. They might have thought it was for good reason, to prevent widespread panic, because if these were extraterrestrials with advanced technologies that could just destroy the Earth quickly, like they don't want the public panicking. So to contain it might actually be a good course of action. We don't know what the information that they had. But in 1947, Harold Dahl claimed to have been warned not to talk about his alleged UFO sighting on Maury Island by a man in a dark suit. So this was a June 21st incident in 1947.
Okay.
Okay, so Roswell was on June 14th, which is when a cluster of debris was actually spotted 30 miles north of Roswell. And this debris was found in early July. So the Maury Island incident was on June 21st. So it's coinciding pretty close here. And I'll just go over real quick this Maury Island incident for those that don't know. I'm sure Maxwell is well aware of this incident in Washington State. Maxwell?
I
No?
have no idea what it is.
So this incident was observed by Fred Chrisman and Harold Dahl of falling debris and unidentified flying objects in the sky over Maury Island in Puget Sound. And Men in Black sightings followed. threats by these men in black followed this sighting, and this is one of the earliest known men in black sightings. So, most of this comes from a report by Kenneth Arnold, an aviator who claimed to see several UFOs in the area at the time, and this is some of the first UFO sightings ever recorded. We're talking June 21st, 1947. Chrisman and Dahl claimed to Arnold that they were harbor patrolmen on a workboat near Maury Island and that they saw 6 donut-shaped objects in the sky. According to Chrisman and Dahl, one of the objects dropped a substance that resembled lava or white metal onto their boat, breaking a workman's arm and killing a dog. Dahl also claimed he was later approached by a man in a dark suit and told not to talk about the incident. While even the claim that Chrisman and Dahl were harbor patrolmen is now believed to be false, Arnold was convinced by their story and contacted an Air Force intelligence officer who flew in along with another from California. The officers concluded the metal objects were aluminum and not of interest. They did not reveal this to Arnold, however, to avoid embarrassing him. The officers then died in a crash on their way back to California. Now, is that coincidental, Maxwell? Or JR? Is that a coincidence? I mean, I don't know. That's a little strange, don't you think?
Mm.
Nothing?
Well, the fact that they were eliminated, after they had disclosed this information is actually not strange to me.
Well, no. The witnesses weren't eliminated. The officers, the Air Force
No,
intelligence
but that's what I'm saying. Like, the fact that the people that had boots on the ground that had the knowledge, and all of a sudden they don't exist anymore. Like that's standard procedure as far as I'm concerned. I don't know what Maxwell has to say about.
I haven't heard of it being standard procedure to eliminate Air Force intelligence officers. Usually they told they
Do
were.
you work for the government?
No, I don't.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah.
But I've looked at dozens upon dozens of cases.
Yeah. You can look at as many things as you want. Just take my word for it. That's standard procedure. So
we don't take anybody's word for anything on MindShock. This is a logical podcast.
Bruce. As soon as people are hey, this happened. As soon as there's a vocalization when it should be silent, those people are generally vaporized. Why do you think that I'm sitting here talking about you haven't pegged down what alphabet soup organization I work for? That's because
let me just finish my point here. In the dozens upon dozens upon dozens of cases that I've looked at, Army intelligence officers, regardless of which branch of the military they came from, usually when they come to investigate, they just tell the witnesses there's nothing here, like in this case, and then they disappear. Now, you're saying they could be killed after the fact? That's possible. I'm not saying that's not possible. I'm just saying standard operating procedure seems to be to deny anything was up. And that's it. And then some of these agents actually did come forward after the fact. There are
standard operating procedure based on actual operating procedure could be different. And you're also talking about we're talking about extraterrestrial involvement. We're not necessarily talking about hey, we built this base or we fixed this truck and now it works. We're talking about shit where hey, we came across this stuff where this could change the general scope of mankind, and
well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure you could make that assumption. For all we know, this UFO could have been some government craft testing something. We don't know that this was extra.
Weather balloon.
Yeah, well, we don't know what it was. So to make the jump to it's extraterrestrial, I don't know. Either way, the FBI actually investigated this case and concluded that Chrisman and Dahl's sightings were a hoax. Now that seems like standard operating procedure, not killing all the agents involved, but I don't know. In their
file, again, it was a hoax, but people that had made knowledge that was off to the side, they disappeared for a long time, and keep in mind they necessarily weren't killed. A lot of people they were killed.
That's a good point. That's a good point. We don't. How do we know for sure that they? I mean, the story.
They weren't necessarily killed. They were just relocated for
that's a good point. That's a good point. We don't really
know for a permanent period of time.
In their files, they noted that Dahl stated that if questioned by the authorities, he was going to say it was a hoax because he did not want any further trouble over the matter. The files also detail a few alternate stories communicated by Chrisman and Dahl to local newspapers and other media outlets, and conclude that they had contacted a variety of publications in the hope of building up their story through publicity to a point where they can make a profitable deal with Fantasy Magazine, Chicago, Illinois. Now, here's a problem I have with this kind of reporting. If they did see what they saw, wouldn't they want to make money off of it? Like, how does that mean it was a hoax? You know what I mean? Like, how do you make that jump?
Well, I mean, like, people are people. If I needed to feed my family and, like, I needed to come up with something in order to expedite my family, I'd probably, I mean, like, some of your viewers might ask, like, why am I a mind shock? You know, keep in mind, I'm not compensated by you. I'm not endorsed by you, by any means. I'm here for pure, just informational purposes. But, like, not every single government agent, or forget government, but, like, not necessarily every single person is falling into the same category as me. Some people, like, they want the profit. They want the money. They want the book deal. So, I mean, but not everyone is like that. I mean, some people, they're willing to experience a paranormal situation and then say, hey, I did this, I report this to the media, and then that's it. Like, they don't have any kind of, there's no aftershock. There's no, hey, I'm going to go on Alex Jones and say, hey, I did this and that. You know what I mean? So, I mean,
Don't start trash talking Alex Jones. I think that's Maxwell's favorite news. What do we call him? Reporter. What would you call Alex Jones? We actually did a podcast on Alex Jones and him getting deplatformed off of like YouTube and Facebook and Twitter, and not even being told over what comments. Like, they just covered it under hate speech without even specifying what the hate speech was, which is kind of strange because he's been talking the same madness since day one, basically. So I don't know what happened there. Do you have any idea what happened with that, JR?
Well, I mean, when you talk about Alex Jones' platform has changed over the years. In 1999, he was talking about planes that would fall from the sky when it turns the year 2000. I mean, today, like, the rhetoric, I don't necessarily a proponent. I mean, don't get me wrong, I could believe in conspiracy theories. Do I believe in Alex Jones? Some of the people he may or may not be associated with, I believe their stories. But what's with all of a sudden he's selling like oil that's like a miracle cure? Like, to me, that's a snake oil merchant. So, I mean,
well, how do you know?
I can't speak for Maxwell.
No, I don't. I haven't actually tried any of the products that he sells. But how do you know it's not legitimate? How do you know it doesn't work if you haven't tried it? Don't knock it till you try it.
I don't, and I'm being honest. I don't. But I mean, I don't know that, his products don't magically work. But he has a specific tone and a specific aura that resonates with 200 years, to 300 years, to 400 years, to 500 years of being a snake oil merchant, where he doesn't have any particular wares to sell. He just sells the ideal of what he's saying at that particular moment in time.
Let's get focused here. So let's go over the exact account. So Harold Dahl worked on one of these boats, and his supervisor on shore was Fred Chrisman. And these guys were supposedly an informal harbor patrol, and they collected logs and took them to the mills for a salvage fee. So Dahl reported that on June 21st, he was on his patrol boat with two men, his son, and their dog. Around 2 in the afternoon, Dahl's boat approached the east shore of Maury Island. Maury Island is now attached to Vashon Island by a causeway road and is about 6 miles west of Des Moines, Washington. Dahl looked in the sky and saw 6 objects floating about 2,000 feet above his ship. The objects were made of some reflective metal, donut-shaped, and about 100 feet in diameter. The center holes were about 25 feet in diameter. Dahl said he saw round portholes and what he thought was an observation window. 5 of the craft circled over the 6th, which dropped slowly. It stopped and hovered about 500 feet above the water. Dahl put to shore because he was afraid the center aircraft was going to crash into his boat. Once ashore, Dahl took several pictures with his camera. The lower ship stayed in position for about 5 minutes, while the others still circling above. One of the ships left the formation and moved down, touching the lower ships. The two kept contact for several minutes until Dahl said he heard a thud. Suddenly, thousands of pieces of what he thought were newspapers dropped from the inside of the center ship. Most of the debris landed in the bay, though some of it hit the beach. Dahl recovered a few pieces, finding it was a white, lightweight metal. Along with the white metal, the ship dropped about 20 tons of a dark metal, which he said looked like lava rock. When the lava rock hit the water, it was so hot that steam erupted. They took cover after several pieces landed on his boat, damaging it. Some debris hit his son on the arm, burning him, and another piece killed his dog. After the rain of metal, the craft rose into the air and headed west out to sea together. Dahl went to his boat and tried to radio for help, but it did not work. They sailed back toward their dock, dropping the dog over the side as a burial at sea. Dahl took his son to the hospital for treatment and then told his boss, Fred Chrisman, what had happened. Dahl gave Chrisman the camera, and when the prints were developed, they showed the strange airships. However, the negatives had spots on them, which he compared to film damaged by exposure to radiation. Chrisman said he did not believe Dahl's story, but nevertheless, he went back to Maury Island, where he gathered some rock samples. He said while he was gathering the rocks, one of the airships appeared overhead as if it was watching him. Dahl told investigators the next morning a man wearing a black suit visited him and suggested they go to breakfast together. Dahl drove his own car, following the stranger's new black Buick, and we'll get into vehicles that these men in black supposedly drive because they seem to be the same models popping up all over the world, to a restaurant. While they ate, the stranger asked no questions. Instead, he gave a detailed account of what had happened to Dahl the day before. The man in black warned Dahl that bad things would happen to Dahl and his family if he told anyone about the incident. Dahl and Chrisman sent a package to publisher Ray Palmer in Chicago. A year or two later, Palmer founded Fate magazine. The package contained a box of metal fragments and statements about the strange happenings on the 21st and 22nd of July. A few weeks later, Palmer contacted Kenneth Arnold, who had begun investigating UFOs. Arnold arrived in Tacoma in late July with airline pilot E.J. Smith. The two of them met with Dahl and Chrisman, examined Dahl's boat, and conducted interviews. Dahl and Chrisman did not produce the pictures, however. Dahl also told Arnold that his son had disappeared. Dahl said later that his son was found waiting tables in Montana, but could not remember how he got there. What do you think of this story so far, Maxwell? Maxwell?
It's kind of weird.
That's all you got?
That's all I got.
On the afternoon of July 31st, Captain Lee Davidson and First Lieutenant Frank Brown of the U.S. Army Air Force flew up to Tacoma from Hamilton Field, California. In addition to being pilots, the two men were intelligence specialists. They met with Arnold, Smith, and Chrisman for several hours. One of the officers said that he thought there might have been something to the story, but they had to leave around midnight. They were in a hurry to be at Hamilton Field on August 1st, the day when the Air Force was to split from the Army. The two officers flew out to McCord Airfield around 2 o'clock in the morning on a B-25 bomber with a crew of 2 other men. About 20 minutes later, the airplane crashed near Centralia, Washington. The two enlisted men managed to parachute to safety, but Davidson and Brown were killed, making them the Air Force's first casualties. Dahl and Chrisman said that the Air Force officers took some of the strange metal on board. People thought they heard anti-aircraft guns shoot the plane down. The local newspapers and FBI received phone calls stating that the plane was shot down to cover up the information Brown and Davidson had found. Because of the loss of life, the Air Force broadened its investigation and the FBI launched their own. The Air Force investigators determined that the crash had been a terrible accident. One of the engines caught on fire and the men to begin bailing out. Before Brown and Davidson could jump out, a wing broke and struck the tail section, which also broke off. The plane went into a spin, trapping the men inside. Another Air Force investigator spoke with Dahl and Chrisman and visited their boat. He stated the damage he saw did not match the damage the two sailors described. There were no pieces of metal on Maury Island, and the existing samples looked like slag from a metal smelter. His conclusion matched that of the FBI investigator, that Dahl and Chrisman had faked the incident to gain publicity for a magazine article. The FBI warned Dahl and Chrisman that their hoax had not succeeded, and that if they dropped the matter, the government would not prosecute the two men for the fraud, which had resulted in the deaths of the two officers. How did their fraud result in the death of the two officers if that was unrelated? JL?
Well, I mean, like, let me just say this. First of all, like, there's a lot of different metals that are not recorded within the scientific table of elements, you know, like that the government has access to. There are many different, I mean, like, if you're in school, any level, that has access to the table of elements, like, you know, you see the particular, you know, factors, and then, like, you know, onto the side, there's the man-made version that's included within the table of elements. There are many other elements that the government has access to that are not publicized. But onto that, I'm not really surprised that, like, you know, it went down that way. I mean, like, you know, I was trained. I mean, like, there's actually videos. I mean, I'm not going to get into specifics, but, you know, how you deal with a particular incident. So, I mean, like, the fact that, like, they were told their bullshit created all this situation. And, you know, like, ultimately, I'm surprised because, I mean, like, after all this is said and done, the IRS would normally sue them for damages.
You're not a big
They
fan. You're
didn't.
not a big fan of the IRS, are you?
The IRS is a very interesting instrument.
All right,
I don't know if you.
let's stick to the task at hand here. So,
Well, I mean, like, let's just say, like, you know, like, I'm surprised they were even told about anything. I mean, normally, like, you know, like, when it comes to the death of military officials, and we're not talking about conspiracy here, we're just talking about in general. I mean, even in war, where it's obvious, hey, like, we went to this place that the American people know about, and, like, these officers died. There's a certain shadow that occurs. So, I mean, you know, like, the fact, you know, these people were, it was disclosed to them that, like, hey, like, you know, like, this occurred. That's interesting. I mean, I have to say, I mean, like, I have no knowledge of this particular event, but the fact that most people, especially when a government official dies, not necessarily even, like, you know, military, but, like, actual vested military, such as officers, they perish in an event. That's interesting that it was disclosed to people that were involved.
well, this was
Because,
well. What I noticed, a lot of these cases from the 40s, the 50s, they're a lot less secretive. There's supposedly there was a battle, a UFO battle over Los Angeles, and it was actually published in the newspapers.
I mean, you know, that's just, you know, and the only reason why I can explain that is that's the government understanding or adapting to the version of media within its time. You know, like, we can say, like, hey, like, you know, like, but I mean, like, look at Facebook. I mean, look at Trump. All of a sudden there's this issue whether or not he was elected based on, I mean, and we're not talking about elections. I'm not talking about votes. I'm not talking about sides. I'm not talking about anything. But, like, you know, all of a sudden there's this issue regarding the way he was elected into office based on social media. Like, the same thing can be said about this incident, because the government, even though it created the internet or created, you know, social media or created a variety of things, it's not necessarily cognizant of how the general public, once it's been introduced to that entity, will react.
All right, well let's get focused here because you always go off track like a madman. But so
Well, I'm just saying. I'm answering your question.
yeah, so the FBI warned once again. They warned Dahl and Chrisman, and yeah, they just need to drop the matter. So at first, Dahl and Chrisman went along. They made statements that the story was a fake and simply refused to give interviews on the matter. Now here's the thing, if you were them and if you knew you saw what you saw and it was legit and then you were threatened by the FBI, what would you do?
I'm the wrong person to ask about that.
Yeah, Maxwell, what would you do?
I would do what they tell me to do. I don't know.
So does that really prove that their story is a hoax? I mean, I'm having trouble drawing these conclusions and assumptions that certain people are making. I'm not saying it was real in any way. I'm saying if it was real, these justifications to prove it was a hoax because they admitted it was a hoax. If they were forced to admit it by the FBI, how does that prove it was a hoax? If it was a hoax, it was a hoax. I mean, that's fine, but this specific aspect does not prove it was a hoax, does it?
Yeah.
So, okay, so here's the thing. They made these statements, but a few years later, in 1950, in Fate magazine, Chrisman stated that the incident had happened, and Kenneth Arnold included Maury Island in his 1952 book, The Coming of the Saucers. Today, most people believe that Chrisman and Dahl faked the incident, perpetuating a hoax that got out of control. Other people believe that the U.S. government was behind a conspiracy that may have involved anything from UFOs to dumping nuclear waste in Puget Sound. They believe a shadow government agency sabotaged the B-25 bomber in order to eliminate the investigators and blame Dahl and Chrisman. Some investigators recently visited the crash site hoping to find some of the strange rocks to prove things one way or another, but so far, no answers have been found. So that's the Maury Island incident, and supposedly, okay, so you guys are aware of the Majestic 12 documents or no?
I'm
What's
not
the
at liberty to discuss that. I mean, if you want to discuss that, like, we'll talk about a separate video or whatever. Like, I mean, I actually know people that were involved with Majestic 12. We're not.
So you're not
Like,
willing.
I
You're
mean,
not
we
willing.
just
You're not willing to say whether that was a disinfo job or not, because I believe the documents were. From what I've seen, it appears that the documents could have been legitimate, but the information contained in the documents was intentional disinfo as some kind of experiment or project. For those that don't know, Majestic 12 or MJ12 is the code name of an alleged secret committee of scientists, military leaders, and government officials formed in 1947 by executive order by U.S. President Harry S. Truman to facilitate recovery and investigation of alien spacecraft.
and that was only one-time committee, right? If you want to talk about that, like, that's fine. But like, we're gonna like.
Hold on. We don't have to talk about it. I'm just letting the listeners know what it is. The concept.
No, I mean, like, no, like, we can end this right now. Like, like, if you want to, like, get into that, I didn't know you were going to go there.
I'm just making a quick reference to the Maury Island incident within Majestic 12, so I have to let the listeners know what Majestic 12 is quickly. So the concept originated in a series of supposedly leaked secret government documents first circulated by ufologists in 1984. Upon examination, the Federal Bureau of Investigation declared the documents to be completely bogus, and many ufologists consider them to be an elaborate hoax. Majestic 12 remains popular among some UFO conspiracy theorists, and the concept has appeared in popular culture, including TV, film, and literature. Now, here's the other funny thing. If Majestic 12 is produced by the government, how does the FBI calling them bogus debunk them? Can you wrap your head around that, Maxwell?
no?
Because it's almost mind-boggling. Like, yeah, they could be fake, that's fine. But how does a government agency saying they're fake prove that they're fake if the source is the government? Without talking specifically about MJ12 in this situation, JR, does the government expect the common man to just buy this? Have they never understood anything about conflict of interest or just basic logic?
And you're referring to the the Majestic 12, right? When you say that,
Well, to anything, to any kind of documents propagated by the
I
government.
exercise my Fifth Amendment privilege.
I thought it was a right and not a privilege. Let's not get into that.
I exercise my Fifth Amendment privilege. I'm not going there with you. I'm
Okay.
not.
So here's the thing. The only reason I mentioned MJ12 is because it mentions that metal fragments were part of a nuclear reactor and they were turned over to the CIA. Craig Glenday also cited the Maury Island incident along with the Arnold sightings in his 1999 book, The UFO Investigator's Handbook, as a notable UFO incident surrounding Mount Rainier, which he described as a UFO laboratory. Can you speak on that or no, JR? The Mount Rainier being a UFO laboratory?
Okay, I'll say that I'm not saying it's a UFO laboratory. I'm saying that, like, there's a lot of information regarding that. I mean, like, and, like, you're just fucking lucky because I like you that I'm not exercising my bullshit privileges here. That, like, yeah, like, there's a lot of information that goes on there that is really shady. Okay, so, I mean, yeah, I'm not going to say it's UFO or not, but that laboratory exists, and that's where we're going to end that.
Okay, and just a quick point to all the listeners. When we're using the word UFO, we're not stating that it's extraterrestrial in origin. UFOs could simply be human-made technology, and
Yeah, of course. Yeah, okay. All right. Yeah, right.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, okay.
Well, do you know what else is interesting about this Chrisman fellow? That was not the end of his 10 minutes in the limelight. So Chrisman was actually, in December 1968, Jim Garrison, New Orleans district attorney, called Chrisman to testify before a grand jury. Supposedly, Chrisman was one of the 3 mysterious hobos arrested and photographed shortly after the shooting in Dallas.
Well, I have to say, Bruce, JFK, I mean, for me personally, I mean, like, I know he just, like, you know, pled the fifth on, like, some bullshit. And, you know, the reason why is because that touches very close to what I do in the government. But when you regard to JFK, I mean, you know, I have a lot to offer. So, I mean, like, you know, that's like Jonestown. I mean,
Well,
like, you know, if you want to get a separate.
let's just focus. Can we focus on the Maury Island incident? Why is some random harbor patrolman who like scavenge logs in Washington State? What is he doing testifying in a grand jury over something that happened over something involving the president in Dallas? Can you explain that
You
one?
guys, you guys never worked in government. I mean, like, you know, really, like, I can see that, like, you know, right now, like, because those are the people that have the facts. It's
But what
the
is
people that,
Chrisman? But what is Chrisman doing in Texas?
because I mean, like, you know, after all, it's I spoke about this in my very first that I did with you guys. It's the ones that, you know, have nothing going on. They're just like mowing a lawn, and then all of a sudden there's this fact that occurs, you know, in their career, and then all of a sudden, like, they're in demand. That's what happens, you know. And then, like, there's this immediate necessity to silence them.
But Maxwell, do you find that strange? Some guy that supposedly was involved in a UFO incident in Washington State is testifying in front of a grand jury for the JFK assassination. Maxwell, what do you think
Yeah,
about that?
yeah. Wait. So hold on. So he was. Wait. Say that again.
Why is this guy who's involved in a UFO sighting in Washington State being called to testify in front of a grand jury over JFK's assassination in Texas? Isn't that a little strange to you? That doesn't seem strange?
Coincidental. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe.
Coincidental.
It's not strange to
Coincidental.
me.
What?
It's not strange to me. I mean, like, you know, first of all, like, you know, like, at the very least, I mean, like, let's say this guy had nothing to offer, like, at the very least, you would ask a jury, why is this guy testifying? Like, you know, so, I mean, like, you know, he's this nobody, but, like, you know, he has something to offer, but, I mean, like, again, like, you know, you're forgetting about you don't understand the keys of the government. Like, even if he had nothing to offer, which he probably did, but let's say
But
he
look at how
didn't,
many years.
it's throwing doubt into the
But how
scope
many?
of the jury.
But how many years later they're just? Do you know how many other guys are out there? Why pick this guy? Anyway, here's the final point of the Maury Island incident. Are you guys sitting down?
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
not. I'm standing.
On Tuesday, April 18th, 2017, the Washington State Senate passed Resolution 8648, recognizing the historical significance of the Maury Island incident, a historic UFO sighting which took place 70 years ago on June 21st, 1947. The resolution was sponsored by Senator Karen Kaiser, who represents the 33rd District, where several scenes in the locally produced independent film about the incident were shot. In addition to commemorating one of the first UFO sightings and man in black encounters of the modern era, the resolution also acknowledged the first two fatalities of the then newly independent U.S. Air Force intelligence officers Captain William L. Davidson and First Lieutenant Frank M. Brown, who were tragically killed when their B-25 mysteriously crashed near Kelso, Washington. The airplane was allegedly carrying evidence from their investigation into the incident. I was happy to sponsor a Senate resolution this week acknowledging the 70th anniversary of the mysterious sightings of flying saucers over Maury Island, Kaiser said in a statement. As you may know, Burien has celebrated the Season of the Saucers with an annual UFO festival for the past few years. I was very pleased that the director, executive producer, and screenwriter of the short award-winning film, The Maury Island Incident, were able to join me in Olympia for the presentation and passage of the resolution. A little levity on the Senate floor was welcome this week. Okay, so can you explain this to me, JR? Has the Washington State Senate gone Hollywood? Like, why? I don't understand why they're passing resolutions commemorating FBI stated hoaxes.
Well,
Like,
I mean, like, let's really examine this. After 70 years, who's to say boo? You're in school till you're 20. Until you're 30, you're like climbing the ladder. When you're in 40, when you're 40 years old, we've achieved the the rung of power. You know what I mean? Like that's really who runs this country. Is I mean, like, we're not talking about the president. We're not talking about like various aspects. We're talking about like the people that run the country at the base level are in their 40s. So I mean, like, you're talking about people that these are people that in their 70s, they're retired. So I mean, like, or they're dead. So I mean, like, it's a very easy aspect, and it's a very easy in to say, hey, like, we're identifying the fact that, like, there are UFOs, and I'm gonna propose this because, after all, I mean, like, that's an easy in. I mean, especially for someone that is wants to be elected, because there's no opposition. Who is going to oppose what that individual is saying? Nobody. Nobody. I mean, nobody's going to say anything.
so
For an incident that's almost 70 years old.
Are you saying that basically this is like state politics has gone Hollywood and pop culture? Like, what?
I'm not saying that it didn't actually occur. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that for the individuals that voted for it, the individuals that said it, they didn't have to believe in it to do what they did.
I get what you're saying, and that's why I asked my question. It seems like kind of like a pop culture plot.
Yeah,
to get, like,
it's
a
bullshit. I mean, it's
pop
almost.
from the
I mean,
from the populace.
think about it. It's like 100 years from now saying, hey, like, I played video games on Steam. Well, I mean, like, yeah, of course you did. But, like, who's gonna question that? You know what I mean?
Maxwell,
So I mean, like,
what do you think about this?
I don't know.
yo, not only am I gonna buy you a beer, I'm gonna buy you a fucking, like, yeah. I mean, seriously, like, I'm gonna buy you a steak and tail dinner.
Wait,
Like, I swear to God.
Can you summarize it? Can you summarize what you guys?
Well, all right. Let me summarize it for you for like like what Bruce is saying. Basically, like what he's saying is that like an elected individual took an incident that was almost 70 years old and tried to make something of it and tried to make it a statement, and now they're trying to bandstand it as if it was something, even though there's no evidence or no. Like, I mean, like, I don't know if you were in my previous video, but, like, we talked about a fecal adhesion, where, like, you throw shit at a wall until it sticks. You know what I mean? I don't know if you were there when, like, we talked about that. I forget. But, like, like, you throw shit at a wall until it sticks. I mean, we're talking about shit that's 70 years old that this man is throwing at a wall until it sticks. And he's trying to be elected. And he's, like, and
Man, Maxwell, are you following or not? The Senate, the state Senate of Washington is passing resolutions commemorating these historic UFO incidents, which were basically called a hoax by the FBI and are regarded as a hoax, and yet the state Senate is passing bills commemorating something that was supposedly a hoax. Don't you find that strange?
because the FBI is
Oh,
believable.
wait, that is
Bruce.
strange.
I mean,
So so wait, they're being stopped. What?
They're being stopped? What are you talking about?
Well, the Senate.
Nobody
they're
stopped
trying
them. The bill
see, the funny thing here is that like everyone like regards like like you as like like, but I'm gonna be honest with you, you should fucking run for president because I mean like 90% of all the crap that runs the government like it just completely passes through your brain. Like it's only like the 5% of actual action that like you catch on to. Like,
all right, let's move on because Maxwell is just.
I would vote for you.
Okay, so let's move on to Albert.
I'm serious here. Like I'm not. I mean,
They
like
are. We're trying to do a podcast.
Bruce is pushing me to move, but like like if you were to be president, like all this other crap where like there's all this bullshit.
I don't believe in the presidency because I don't believe in states. So
that's why you should be one.
Okay.
I wouldn't do anything.
Again, that's why you should be one.
Ufologist in the mid-1950s, ufologist Albert K. Bender claimed he was visited by men in dark suits who threatened and warned him not to continue investigating UFOs. Bender maintained that the men in black were secret government agents who had been given the task of suppressing evidence of UFOs. So let's get into Mr. Albert K. Bender.
Well, let me ask you a question, Bruce. Why are the ones that supposedly the men in black? I have a lot of experience with like a lot of government agencies, but like, why are the men in black always in dark suits?
That's the quintessential look of a government agent, is it not?
No, it's not.
Okay, then.
And so, I say that from experience. The quintessential look of a government agent is to blend in with the people. So I mean, like clearly, why do these people clearly don't? Well, like that's a real question.
Well, they're not spies. Their goal is to intimidate. So I would assume that
they're not spies. It's just it's like even like typical government agents that are like part of other organizations that are not part of the intelligence community. They look like average Joes and like question you like an average Joe. I mean. Look, I've been involved in a lot of different things. Even people that are not involved in the intelligence aspect, they sit there and they'll have a beer with you and they'll talk to you about like, bullshit. And then they'll fucking, you end up getting a letter from the IRS or whatever. Like, that's the way that the government works. They don't fucking show up in like these clean cut suits with ties, like, with this shady look, like, where did that come from?
After we go over all the cases, we'll go over into the theories of exactly what or who the men in black are. So Albert K. Bender was born June 16th, 1921 in Pennsylvania, and he actually died relatively recently. He died on March 29th in 2016, aged 94. So he's actually the author of the 1962 book Flying Saucers and the Three Men, and he was one of the most influential ufologists of the 50s and 60s. He also served in the United States Army Air Forces during World War II, and he founded the International Flying Saucers Bureau. In 1965, he founded the Max Steiner Music Society. So the first major civilian UFO club in the world was his founded International Flying Saucer Bureau in 1952. Now, it was a very successful organization, but he mysteriously completely shut it down just 1 year later in 1953. He admitted that in March 1953, he had been approached by 3 men in black. They visited him in his house and communicated with him telepathically. He received a metal disc from them and instructions. He reported that he felt like he was being transported. These men apparently shared insights into the nature of UFOs. These men shared the origin of UFOs with Bender, and afterwards he became ill and didn't eat for 3 days. After his visitation, Bender was encouraged to share what he had seen with other UFO investigators but refused. Bender suffered frequent headaches after the 3 men visited him, and his co-workers reported that he seemed scared. His experience was recorded in They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers by Gray Barker, Bender's IFSB, the International Flying Saucer Bureau, associate. Bender's experience formed the legend of the Men in Black. But as I've stated, Men in Black encounters were actually reported earlier than this, but this was the first big tale. Bender did not speak of the event for 9 years. In 1962, he wrote Flying Saucers and the Three Men to tell his own story. In the book, Bender recounts that the Men in Black were from a different planet. Barker published his book, but there is speculation that Bender's experience was only a dream. Bender went on to manage a motel in California. Bender was not the first one, however, to report visitations to UFO researchers from Men in Black. Bender reported that he had a second supernatural encounter. He was visited by 3 shadowy figures. They did not touch the floor but hovered above it. They told him that their human appearance was an illusion, and that whatever information he told people about their visitation would not be believed. They supposedly told him that they captured people from Earth and used their bodies to disguise themselves. Bender worked for Acme Shear for 14 years as a supervisor. His publication, Space Review, was the official magazine about ufology news at the time. In 1953, Albert K. Bender was serving in the United States Air Force during World War II. In Bridgeport, Connecticut, he was a supervisor at the Acme Shear factory. The Space Review magazine, which was filled with UFO news. The group became popular in all 49 states. Hawaii joined the U.S. 6 years later. Gray Barker is the contact for West Virginia. Late in the summer of 1953, Bender made a series of discoveries which led him to believe that he had finally found out the truth of the UFO cover-up. He had planned to reveal his findings in the October issue of the Space Review, but before the issue was published, Bender was visited by these 3 men dressed in black, who had read the unpublished report and confirmed his findings. The silencers, as he called them, scared Bender to the point where he did not publish the report but left a warning. We advise those engaged in saucer work to please be very cautious. Bender then suspended publishing on his publication and dissolved the IFSB. What's interesting is Albert K. Bender also founded the Max Steiner Music Society in 1965. It was joined by actors John Wayne, Fred Astaire, and Vincent Price. Isn't that interesting? It officially ended in 1981. Why are all these ufologists involved with these major incidents or some major figures in history? Does that seem weird to you or no? Maxwell, JR, any thoughts on that?
I'll let Maxwell go first.
Well, I don't know what to make of it. I mean,
This
they're famous
UFO guy
people.
is founding music societies with John Wayne and Fred Astaire as members. I mean, It's also strange to me. It's very strange. And this other guy involved with the first case we went over, the Maury Island incident, is testifying in front of a grand jury on JFK's assassination. Like, these people are involved with some very, very major profiles in history. Like, what's going on here? Do you find that strange coincidence? Like, what's going on, Maxwell?
Well, what's the theory of purpose? Why John Wayne? Well, like why? What's
It was
is it to
simply
is it to gain?
it was a music society that they happened to join. They might have not even known he was a ufologist. Who knows? I mean, it's just we don't know that information. You either find it strange or you don't. I mean, I don't know, Maxwell. JR, any thoughts?
Well, I mean, like it's interesting that they would integrate into the music society because, after all, like music is international. It's a universal language. So, I mean, it's not to me personally. No, it's not correct.
Okay, so let's get specific here. So this occurred on the evening of July 30th, 1952. Albert K. Bender received a strange phone while he was alone in his home. His repeated questions did not hear anything at the other end of the thread, but he suddenly felt a strong front pain and unusual dizziness. At that moment, he realized he was receiving a telepathic message. He was being sent to stop studying the UFO phenomenon. Then he heard a buzz in the receiver, then the tone came. By simply checking out the telephone switchboard, he was told that his name had not been requested by anyone at the last minute. Indeed, shortly afterward, Bender laid the foundations of the IFSB, founded in Bridgeport, Connecticut in April 1952. One evening, turning home at dawn at 23:15 from a movie and going through a dark, desolate portion, he had the same dizziness, his forehead hurt, and received a similar message. He was told he would not deal with the IFSB anymore. So, after he arrived at home at 11:15 at night, he opened the door of his room. He smelled a powerful and unpleasant smell of sulfur, hard to bear. It's very interesting. In a lot of these paranormal cases, sulfur is always brought up as the smell. I mean, is that another coincidence? I mean, they couldn't have thought of something else if they're making it up. I mean, it's all very, very strange. All files on the IFSB in his room were ravaged, and the radio was open, but there was nothing but a background noise. He did not remember leaving the radio open when he left. But Bender did not take these signs at all and continued to deal with the UFO phenomenon and the established organization, publishing more and more interesting articles in specialized magazines. One November night, in a cinema hall, in the middle of the movie, on the right side of the movie, he felt the presence of someone, though he had not heard anyone coming and sitting down. He turned his head and was startled when he saw a man in black looking at him with brilliant eyes like the eyes of a cat in the night. It was like two bright lights making the look very dark. Bender felt a dizziness and closed his eyes. When he opened them again, the man disappeared without making any noise. Then, after a few seconds, he came again, this time on the left. Bender got upset and moved to the hall, but not long afterwards he felt a burning, and coming back he saw those eyes again looking at him. He got up and went to call the supervisor, but when he turned around, the man in black was gone, and everyone was watching the movie quietly. Bender quit watching the movie and started to go home. In front of a record shop, he stopped looking for something that was of interest to him. Then he felt the burn again at his neck and turned back, staring at the unknown with his bright eyes only a few steps away from him. At that moment, it was clear that this being was not something familiar, but it was like a being from another world. Then, another evening in 1953, after a meeting of the IFSB, who stood at Bender's home, he headed for his room when he saw a light coming from there. He opened the door and remained in the doorway as he saw a bright blue light in the middle of the room, which began to dissipate at his appearance, then gradually disappeared. But a second later, two glowing lights were still visible for a moment. In March 1953, the leadership of the IFSB proposed to make an attempt to contact the aliens, because at that time much was discussed about UFOs, which had been seen by many, as various reports published in local newspapers showed. Thus, the experiment was to be held on Day C, Day of Contact, and consisted all members of the IFSB that they were going to focus on a message to transmit mentally to the aliens in space. On March 15th, 1953, when Day C was established, Bender was also in his room, and at 6 o'clock he began to focus on the following message. Quote, to the crew of the interplanetary ship that observes our planet called Earth, end quote. Not end quote. To the crew of the interplanetary ship that observes our planet Earth, we, IFSB members, want to get in touch with you. We are your friends, and please come to Earth. We will welcome you with friendship. We'll do our best to get along with you. Repeat the message 3 times, focusing louder. There was a cold felt in his whole body and a sharp headache. He fell asleep and he received the following message. We have been following you for a long time. Do not try to disturb us because we have a mission on your Earth. We are among you. Reverting from that state, Albert Bender first thought he was a dreamer. It was 6:05 p.m. So it took only 5 minutes. The radio was open. Then he made the decision to write everything that had happened to him lately. He had put the paper in an envelope and locked it in his office. All this time, a strong smell of sulfur was in the room, although the window was open, and the smell persisted for many days. He did not have the courage to call anyone, nor to tell anybody about what happened for fear of being made. Maxwell, you still there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Did you get all that, Maxwell?
I missed the last part.
You mean the whole thing?
Sort of.
Okay, he did not have the courage to call anyone, nor to tell anyone about what had happened, for fear of being made. After a few days, he decided to send the envelope to the Pentagon in Washington. But it was not surprising that he found the envelope had disappeared from the drawer in which he had locked it. In July, what?
That's cool.
In July, Bender went on vacation. Upon return on a warm summer evening, he got into the house to find the smell of sulfur and the open-air radio in the room. He was in a state of dizziness and sat down on the bed, feeling an unfamiliar power take hold of him. He woke up in the room with 3 men dressed in black. Only bright, brilliant eyes were seen beneath the birches like flashing lights. Bender heard a voice telling him that he had been chosen to be contacted by an alien civilization that was on Earth for an important mission. He was asked not to tell anyone anything and obey the instructions received. They were going to give him a metallic object that if he was holding in his fist, he could have used it if he wanted to get in touch with them. He had to keep the object in his hand and say Kazik. They were about to meet in 2 days at the same time. One of them opened the radio and fit it between the 2 stations that were emitting at that moment. Bender was wondering why they were doing this, and he was told he could only return to the base. Staying alone, Bender woke up holding the round metallic object, bulging in the middle. It was made of unusual and brilliant metal. He carefully examined it and locked it in a box, thinking that the next day he would officially tell the whole story and present the metal object as a testimony to the veracity of his words. So he fell asleep. In the morning, he went directly to the box, unlocked it, and the plate was no longer there. He felt as if someone had read his thoughts and stopped him from making this public. What the hell's that sound?
What?
Who's
Yo,
making all
there's
that noise?
I don't know.
After
Yo, but
Maybe it's just a fucking story you're talking about. Like, you know, like, I don't know.
After 2 more days in his room, Bender was looking forward to reuniting with the 3 aliens. Everything seemed like a dream rather than a nightmare. From being curious, he opened the box, and the metallic object was there, brighter than ever. After the first moment of surprise, he first thought he wanted to show it to someone. But the moment the metal got red, in color and got so hot that he had to let it out of his hand. It fell to the floor and resumed its original appearance. He realized he would not be able to prove the reality of what had happened. So he picked it up and decided to call the three strangers. He opened the radio and repeated several times, Kazik. After a few seconds, it got very cold and a tremendous force took hold of him. He lay on his bed and felt it was light, and he began to float. After a few seconds, he woke up surrounded by an ambient light in a huge circular room with a transparent vault. It was like being inside a flying saucer. The walls were brilliant as stainless steel. He was immobilized in a chair of metal. In front of him was a tubular screen. There was a creature who was like the three men in black, who was looking at him and began to explain the pictures that appeared on the screen. One of them presented the planet of which the alien ship came from, that was part of a much older solar system than Earth's. They came to Earth to obtain a substance that was vital to them. Then Bender stuttered when he saw in the screen a monster hard to describe. It was one of the inhabitants of the planet in its true form. Apparently, the oxygen in the air was less than they were used to, and they had to adapt their appearance to the air mixture. Changes to the environment would lead to changes in their bodies. Bender said that there were 3 sex beings on the unknown planet, 2 like on Earth, and the third one was a form of exaltations. There was a very rigorous control of their population. Women lay eggs which were kept and blunted only when the great darkness deviates on the planet. When it began to darken in seconds, Bender was back in his room holding the metal object. He had been transported inside the ship for a half an hour and realized no one would believe him. In August 1953, he received another visit from the three men in black. They woke up in an unknown place they said was underground in Antarctica. He stood in a large lighted room that seemed to be built of ice. Is he watching Superman or something? After a few seconds, a man dressed in a golden suit appeared in the room. It had a white, shiny hair that contrasted with a glossy brown skin like a strong bronze. It was the Exalted, a bisexual being. He was leading the base they were at. The ones in front tilted in front of him and approached one another. Clinging to his forehead was a piece of metal that he had in each hand. When he touched his forehead with the metal piece, you could feel a strong energy passing through his arm and reaching his forehead. The entity looked very friendly and ready to answer his questions. Bender found out that these creatures came to the Earth in 1945 to take the water from the sea to be processed in one of their Earth-based laboratories to obtain a vital substance for them. They were to stay on Earth for 15 years, changing their crew every 2 years. They did not pay attention to the Earth, but they had to scare people and sometimes even kill them when there was no other solution. He had been kidnapped by these people and taken to the remote planet for experiments. None of them had survived the conditions there, so they did not even live. Several images were presented to him on a 3-dimensional cinemascope, displaying the evolution of the universe, the catastrophe that had left the planet Mars after the invasion of another civilization, then the image of a city on their planet, and finally the image of a weapon. After the gun was unloaded and the target touched, the load returned to the pipe by a slow motion. Bender had been told that this was his last meeting with them and that he was not allowed to tell anyone their secret until they were gone from Earth, and he would know they were away when the metallic object that he had in his home disappeared. After the break, Bender asked the Exalted to give him proof that they really exist and it is not the fruit of a hallucination of his. He was told that not long after, close to his home, a small ship of theirs would appear, and it would carry with it one of the weapons presented and a small target would be reached. Returning to Earth on August 20th, Bender read in a local newspaper that on August 19th, 1953, a strange explosion had taken place on Middletown Street near Front Street, accompanied by the appearance of an unidentified flying object. There was a large hole in the board Okay, there was a large hole. The investigation was led by August C. Roberts from the investigation sector. He had gone to New Haven to look at the hole. There were no traces of burned metal or any other signs of evidence that a shot had taken place. A more careful search of the inner edges had revealed in the metal structure a sort of residue that had been immediately under investigation, but the result of the analysis had not been made public. There had also been a witness, a neighbor of Bender's, who had stated that he had seen a bright light on the morning of August 19th, 1953 at 9 a.m. passing by her window and almost immediately heard the explosion near the house. Wanting to find out what it was, the witness approached it and saw the smoke coming out of the hole in its center. Around it was a strong smell of sulfur. So this was basically the only evidence of Bender's encounters, and Bender also said that the horrible headaches that started with his encounters had never stopped for the rest of his life. Later, on June 24th, 1967, exactly 2 decades after Kenneth Arnold's death, a well-known ufologist, Dominic Lucchesi, said that Bender, after the 3 men in black, was a man scared to talk. He suffered from terrible headaches that he claimed were controlled by these men in black. Whenever he thought to break his silence, the headaches were violently started. He stated about this, "The 3 men in black had forbidden him to speak, and he dares not do it," said August C. Roberts, another famous American ufologist. He said, "Today Bender runs a motel in California. He refuses to talk about flying saucers." In the 1960s, Bender declared, "When people learn the truth about UFOs, there will be dramatic changes. Science will get a big blow." That's kind of interesting. He's saying all science is wrong and they're going to figure that out. Like, what do you think he means by that? What do you think he means by that, JR?
I don't know.
That was a Maxwell response.
I don't know.
I mean, this whole case of Albert Bender is kind of weird, don't you think? Like, this guy's all into ufology. He's writing books. He's forming international organizations, and all of a sudden, he shuts everything down, writes one book, and then just manages a hotel in California for the rest of his life, not talking about it again, and made this one cryptic statement about everything changing.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, like, it sounds like he was gotten to, but, like, you know, I don't know.
Maxwell, what do you think about this Bender case?
Dude, I'm so lost. I'm getting mixed up with all the characters.
Yeah, I mean, like, really, like, I mean, it's like...
He basically said that these men in black were from another planet. They were not from the U.S. government. And they threatened. What's weird is that he still got his book.
Oh, I thought Men in Black were part of the government that's talking with the aliens and shit.
Yeah.
Well, as I said at the beginning of the podcast, if you were paying attention, Maxwell, the Men in Black were basically government agents that keep the UFO phenomenon and any kind of alien witnesses or alien encounters under wraps by threats.
Yeah.
By threats and intimidation and all that. But Bender is saying that they were actually monsters from the distant planet Kashyyyk. And they gave him this instrument, and then supposedly he met with them either in Antarctica or on a spacecraft. I mean, I don't know what he's talking about. Is it possible this was all some weird LSD trip?
That's possible.
Except for the fact that his neighbor actually witnessed that weapon being demonstrated as they had said to prove their existence. But by the late 1980s, the Men in Black had become ubiquitous, with the Journal of American Folklore taking note of them in an article. But it still remained unclear who exactly they were. So they were called Enforcers for the Silence Group, a group claimed to be associated with international banking interests that sought to stifle the technological advances and moral reforms the Space Brothers wanted to bestow upon Earthlings. To others, they were alien beings, perhaps some speculated, Shavers Deros. In 1962, Bender came down on the side of the aliens. He broke his 9-year silence in Flying Saucers and the Three Men, which he insisted was not a science fiction novel. Bender revealed that the Men in Black who drove him out of ufology were monsters from the planet Kashyyyk. Even Barker, the book's publisher and a relentless Bender promoter, remarked privately and out of customers' hearing that maybe it had all been a dream. Fear of the men in black was generated in part by worries about the possibly hostile motives of UFOs. A popular early book, Flying Saucers on the Attack, by Harold T. Wilkins, 1954, and I know Maxwell's probably read all these books, so he's probably very familiar with all these details, fretted that a cosmic general staff could even now be plotting a real-life war of worlds. But next to demonologist ufologist John A. Keel, author of UFOs Operation Trojan Horse in 1970 and other writings, Wilkins sounded like an optimist. In Keel's rendering, UFO intelligences are not simply extraterrestrials, but ultra-terrestrials, entities from unimaginable other dimensions of reality. Worse, they definitely do not like us at all. Human beings, Keel thunders, are like ants trying to view reality with very limited perceptive equipment. We are biochemical robots helplessly controlled by forces that can scramble our brains, destroy our memories, and use us in any way they see fit. They have been doing it to us forever. How dark is that, guys?
It's pretty dark.
Do you have any knowledge of ultra-terrestrials, JR?
No, I mean, I can't say I have any knowledge of ultra-terrestrials, but that's pretty dark. I mean, like, you know, like, I don't know what Maxwell has to say about it, but it's not even dark. It's fucked up.
All right, well, let me go over some of these major Men in Black accounts. Okay, so here's an account submitted of the Men in Black. I was born, raised, and continue to live in the mountains of eastern Kentucky. I have experienced various paranormal activity all through my life. This includes UFOs, alien abduction, and other activity I attribute to alien beings. The incident that was the most overwhelming was on the night when gray aliens came to take me while I was pregnant. Are you following, JR?
Oh, yeah.
I simply wanted no part of this. When they approached me from across the bedroom, I jumped up and grabbed one of the two beings by its lean neck. I squeezed as hard as I could until I heard a crack. It dropped to the floor as its head fell back across the spine. Well, I haven't read too many accounts.
Before you even finish, I'd like to know what Maury Povich felt about like this particular.
I haven't read.
That's what it sounds like to me.
I haven't read too many accounts where abductees are murdering aliens with their bare hands. I mean, I don't know.
I mean, this is
I don't know how in shape.
Springer.
I don't know how in shape this pregnant woman is, but like clearly she used to work out.
This is Alien Springer Maury Povich. I mean, like, you know, like I'm curious, like, what Connie Chung would have to say about like something like this.
Well, I'm curious to see what you would say if they actually had a video of this account and they could prove it. I would like your thoughts on it.
I mean, like, you know, like I have a lot to say, but I mean, like, you know, there's no video, so I mean, like,
well, how do you know? Let me finish here. The other gray seemed shocked, though it was hard to read an expression. It gathered the injured companion and quickly disappeared in bright light that had originally flooded the master bathroom. I felt very bad about that incident, but I had been out of all sorts all day and I didn't want to be bothered. When I was a girl, we used to live beside an old cemetery. On some nights, I would get the urge to look out my bedroom window. When I did, I would notice a tall, dark figure that seemed to be watching our house. One evening at dusk, while in our yard, I was approached by a tall, black-cloaked being with a glow coming from its face. It stood and watched me for a few seconds, then turned and disappeared. I have noticed over the years that large, dark-colored cars would follow me on occasion. This would happen on highways and mountain roads. My husband and I have also noticed black helicopters flying above us while driving and over our residence. I saw the video and picture you posted about the MIB a few days ago. When I saw the video, it shocked me. In July 2006, a strange incident occurred while my daughter and I were sitting in our front porch. I mean,
like, you know, like, wait. Let me just stop you right there, Bruce. I mean, like, you know, like, all this crap has happened, but, like, there's a strange incident. I mean, like, where the fuck do these people come from? Like,
this woman, this might be the only pregnant woman ever who has ever claimed to have murdered an extraterrestrial with her bare hands by snapping its neck.
But I mean, like, you know, like, all this shit happens, and like, there's a strange incident. I mean, like, what?
Well,
the
wait. Do you
fuck?
want to wait? Do you want to hear what it is? Although I must say, if those like typically gray aliens are, and even the green aliens, all these aliens, they're supposedly these skinny humanoids that are physically very weak, but they use their mental power to control. What if these aliens, their telepathic abilities just happen to fail them, and then even a pregnant woman is capable of snapping their neck with her bare hands? That's
Well,
very
let me tell you something, Bruce. Let me just tell you something. You don't fuck it with a pregnant lady. Right? I mean, like, like, I'm not even talking about, like, being a government employee. You don't fuck with a pregnant lady. Like, I mean, like, they have, like, this, like, extraordinary situation going on there. Like, you don't fuck with a pregnant lady.
Maxwell, do you concur on that?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, no, like, he does. Like, just, like, you don't, like, I mean, he might be a little, like, he might be, like, distracted or something. Like, you don't fuck with a pregnant lady.
All right. So, I never heard or saw a car, but two of these MIB appeared from around the side of the house and approached us. The pale-faced men.
You're laughing, but, like, the fact is like, you've never fucked with a pregnant lady. Like, you don't do that. Like, I mean, like,
No,
you do that, like, all of a sudden, like, there's this situation. Like,
yeah, I wouldn't do that. I
I feel like, you say that, Bruce, but, like, Maxwell's laughing because, like, he has. Like, I could tell, like, like, everyone's just like, she's pregnant, blah, blah, blah. And then, like, you fuck with them, and, like, you understand. Like,
yeah, no, that's not something I would do. So, the pale-faced men were dressed in black suits, white shirts, black ties, and fedora dress hats. They each carried a thin briefcase and walked stiffly as they approached. When they reached the steps, they stood still and looked at me. My daughter quickly ran into the house. I then looked into the eyes of the MIB nearest me. The color was a vivid lavender, and I felt compelled to continue looking. After a few seconds, the nearest Okay, after a few seconds, the nearest MIB spoke in a very clear, low-pitched voice. It asked if we had experienced any unusual activity that I thought I should report. It was an odd question, but I quickly said no. The being then briefly smiled, thanked me for my time. Both MIB turned and walked towards the road and were soon out of sight. I can't say that I was scared, but I have not had any type of paranormal or alien activity since the MIB visited. I was wondering if people who have had paranormal incidents throughout their life realize the activity ceases after they are visited by the MIB. Do these MIB usually appear out of nowhere? I'd appreciate some information. Thanks. So this is an interesting count for a couple different reasons. One, an alien got murdered by trying to mess with a pregnant woman. Like, I guess they were trying to abduct her, and she just wanted no part of it, as she said.
I'm telling you, Bruce, you don't fuck with the pregnant lady. Like, I mean, I don't care if you're extraterrestrial. I don't care if, like, I don't care who you are. You don't fuck with the pregnant lady. Like, like, they have these instincts. Like, that just doesn't happen. Like,
But what's more bizarre, the fact that she didn't find that strange, and she found it more strange that a couple of guys in black suits and fedoras asked her if something strange happened. Like, that was the strange part of her account, not the.
Well, I mean, like, let me just put it to you this way, like, people might have showed up at her door with, like, black suits and fedoras, but, like, I mean, like, Chuck Norris could have fucking showed up at her door. Like, you don't fuck with a pregnant lady.
Oh, Maxwell,
like
Maxwell, what do you think about this incident?
That's just the end of the line. Like, I mean, it doesn't matter who it is. Like, you don't fuck with a pregnant lady.
Oh man, Maxwell, what's your take on this whole situation?
I don't know. I'm a little lost. But, like, so this pregnant lady encountered some men in black, or is she part of men in
You
black?
know what I'm talking about, dude. Like,
Maxwell just asked if the lady was part of the men in black.
it doesn't even even matter, man. Like, like, he knows what I'm talking about. Like, he knows what I speak of. Like, you don't fuck with a pregnant lady.
Okay,
It doesn't matter. I mean, you could be part of a government entity.
Okay.
You could be part of some sort of secret research project. You could be Chuck Norris. You could be anybody. Like, you don't fuck with a pregnant lady.
Maxwell,
Yeah.
this lady was pregnant, and she was about to be abducted by aliens, and she said she wanted no part of it, so she actually just walked up to one of them and snapped its neck with her bare hands. Were you not
That's
paying
some funny
attention?
shit. I don't know. Like the way you said it now is more effective than the way you did it before. I don't know.
And so then she was visited by the men in black who asked her if anything strange had happened. She said no, and then they smiled and left. So I think what JR is getting at is they knew she was lying, but because they didn't want to mess with her, they were forced to smile politely and walk away. Did I get that right, JR?
They were smart. Fucking MIT.
Okay, that's what you're laughing at because
Okay.
she was pregnant and no one wanted
All
to
right,
fuck with her.
let's
Okay,
let's
got it.
Oh,
get into another account. Okay, so this was a MUFON witness report. I'm an old lady that was startled by someone trying to open my side house door yesterday night. Before this happened, I had multiple UFO sightings near my son's house in Death Valley, California. One incident. Oh man!
And you keep laughing, Bruce, because you know I'm right. Like, I'm like, you know I'm right.
I know. I'm not disputing that fact. Oh man! Well, now the
I mean, like,
aliens know.
fucking bear is my protector, young man. But like, like when you talk about human, like, women, like, you don't fuck with a pregnant lady.
Well, and that other alien knew better than to mess with her too, because he just scooped up his lifeless companion when he got out of Dodge.
It's not even like, fucking like bears to protect your young men. Like, like when it comes to human beings and pregnant women, like, you don't fuck with their children. Like, you just don't fuck with them. Like, the extraterrestrial knows it. Like, the fucking government knows it. Fucking the MIB knows it. You just don't fuck with them. Like,
one incident was when we were driving in the interstate and saw two triangles hovering in the sky and presumed to follow us for about an hour. My son is in.
because you're trying to fucking move forward, but like, you understand what I'm saying.
Yes, okay. My son is an avid astronomer and now believes in UFOs. I personally don't, but yesterday night around 10:30 p.m., I was startled by a door being slammed, my door being shook. I grabbed my camera and took pictures of a man near my curb. I am frightened for my life. I have called my son and he is coming to pick me up tomorrow. I did not call the police because I'm afraid of something happening to me. I hear stories of men in black appearing out of nowhere, but I always never believed them. As of yesterday, I do now. So, I mean, there's not a lot to go on that one. I mean, clearly she wasn't pregnant, but...
She should have been. Like, if she was, like, the fucking solstice would have stood aside. Like, because, like, they understand, like, like...
Okay, so here's an excerpt of Chapter 14 of Dr. Berthold E. Schwartz's book, UFO Dynamics, Psychiatric and Psychic Dimensions of the UFO Syndrome, Book 1. It contains the story he was told of a very strange man in black encounter described to him by a Maine physician, Dr. Herbert Hopkins, from the state of Maine. Shirley Fickett of Portland, Maine, was actually the first researcher to interview Dr. Hopkins about this mysterious and frightening sounding event. Here is her initial report. Call from Mrs. Hopkins. September 12th, 1976. I received a call from Mrs. Hopkins approximately 1 p.m. stating... Man, JR, what are you doing?
I'm just like, you just know I'm right. Like, it's like, you don't fuck with the pregnant ladies. Like, I mean, it has nothing to do with this podcast. Like, you just don't fucking fuck with them. Like, I mean, like, You know, like, I've been there, I've done that, I've tried that. Like, you don't fucking do that. Like, you like,
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
we've actually done we've been 10 minutes beyond me saying that initially. So,
I
you
think
know,
we're like
you
20. Yeah, we're going on like 20 minutes. Okay.
yeah,
So
you don't fuck with pregnant ladies. You just don't do that.
Oh man, okay. So I received a call from Mrs. Hopkins approximately 1 p.m. stating that the previous evening her husband, Dr. Hopkins, had received a visit from an MIB. She was quite shaken and said that the doctor had been told to dispose of all of his UFO material. I visited the home of the doctor on the above date and stated here is what he related to me. His wife, Madeline, had gone to the outdoor movie with an elder son and his wife. Also, without knowing it, the doctor's younger son and his girlfriend were also at the same outdoor movie. This left the doctor alone in the house, an occurrence that hadn't happened for some time. The doctor, a spiritualist minister, had just called Etna, Maine, spiritual convention that is held there. It was about 8 p.m. After his call, the phone rang. Answering it, a man at the other end stated that he was the vice president of the NJ UFO Research Foundation. He gave no name but said he was a personal friend of Betty and Barney Hill. He had read about the Stevens case in Official UFO and wanted to talk to the doctor about the case. The doctor invited the man over, giving directions on how to get there, to which the man replied he already knew where the doctor was. The doctor put the phone on the hook and went to put the porch light on, and the visitor was there immediately. He had asked if he was phoning from the area, and he had said yes. There is no public phone that could deliver him there that fast. The doctor's thought was he looks like an undertaker, observing his attire. The derby, black suit, black tie, black shoes, but white shirt. The suit fit the MIB like a dummy in a store. The doctor noticed particularly the crease in the pants, not a wrinkle. After greeting the MIB, the doctor invited him in, and the man removed his hat, with the doctor observing that he had no hair, no eyelashes, no eyebrows. His skin was a pure white. His mouth was bright red in contrast. The doctor asked him to sit down, which he did. The crease in his trousers intrigued me, the doctor stated. The crease in the knees stood up and looked almost artificial. The MIB spoke in a monotone voice, very articulate, as if he had learned our language but not mastered it. His face was without any wrinkles, nose was small, and ears were small and set low. The MIB asked the doctor to tell him about the Stevens case, and the doctor complied, stating that he had done some hypnosis and learned things that David had no knowledge of. You made tape recordings, the MIB said. The doctor affirmed this was true. The MIB then said, you have 2 coins in your pocket. This was correct. The doctor pulled out a dime and a penny. The MIB said, take one of those and place it in your outstretched palm. The doctor complied and looked at the MIB, who told him, look at the coin and not me, and don't take your eyes off it. It was the penny that the doctor held. As he watched it, it turned from copper to silver, then to a metallic blue. The doctor then had difficulty at focusing his eyes upon the coin, for there was a fuzziness about it. The next thing, the coin disappeared by fading away. The doctor says he felt no sensation as this was happening, no vibrations, no tingling, nothing. But his arm did drop down, and mustering up strength, he managed to bring it back up and placed it in his lap. Panic then began to build up within him. While they were talking, the doctor made an observation. The MIB at one point put his hand to his mouth, and then he took it down. There was a red stain on his fingertip, as though he were wearing lipstick or something painted on. After the coin disappeared, the doctor said, that's a neat trick, now make it come back. To which the MIB replied, neither you or anyone else on this plane will ever see that coin again. The visitor then asked if the doctor knew why Barney Hill died, and the doctor answered that he understood that he was ill. He was then told it was because Barney knew too much. The doctor said he understood that Barney died of a heart attack. The MIB speaks, that is not correct. He did not die of a heart attack. He died because he lost his heart, just like you lost your coin. He continued, if you don't do as I say, you will die like Barney Hill. The doctor was then told to destroy tape recordings and all correspondence relating to UFOs, to put them out of his mind and not think of them again. The MIB stated that he would know when he did these things. The visitor asked if the doctor had recently had problems with the phone, and the answer was yes. To this he was told, Well, just think about it. The doctor says that his son recently tried to call 4 times and it was like the line was dead. Also, a patient had said the same after trying 3 times. This sort of thing had been going on. The MIB said, "You received a letter from Shirley Fickett. Destroy it." The doctor did this, also told not to answer it. Toward the last part of the conversation, the doctor noticed the MIB's speech was slowing down and he terminated the whole thing by saying, "My energy is getting low, must go now, goodbye." With this, he got up and went to the door with the doctor observing him going down the stairs with caution, slowly, as if he might fall. As the MIB walked toward the driveway, the doctor noticed a bright light, as if a car was waiting for him. But he heard no sound, no motor, no cars going by, etc. The doctor then rushed to the kitchen to observe, but saw no light except the porch light. The man was no longer visible. Upon this, the doctor then rushed to the front porch and knew the man would have to pass this window to get out of the yard. Still nothing. Upon going immediately outside and observing up and down the street, there was still no one to be seen. Nor were there any cars anywhere at that time. This statement was made to me by a person who was very much in control of himself, very definite on just what occurred, and he wanted to relate it in the exact order of its happening. He said he did not have any fear of telling me this, but there was a fright within him about the threat itself. The doctor did not notice anything peculiar about the eyes of the MIB. It was the voice. It did not sound mechanical for all of its monotone quality, yet the doctor stated, "What visited me here was not of this earth." He did not call police about the threat, for he knew what their response would be.
Well, let me just say something, like, on my verse. Like, first of all, like, we're all worried that, like, this one guy, but, like, thank God it's not a pregnant lady. And, like, if it was, like, she would have, he wouldn't have to worry about anything, because, like, let me tell you something, like, she would have burned that into his soul. So, I mean, like, we're not...
Let me finish this account. So the doctor did not notice anything peculiar about the eyes of the MIB. It was the voice. It did not sound mechanical for all of its monotone quality, yet the doctor stated, "What visited me here was not of this earth." He did not call the police about the threat, for he knew what their response would be. He couldn't understand why he should receive the visit from the MIB, for he was skeptical of their existence in the first place, and even skeptical about UFOs. After the man left, the doctor was very shaken and began to pace the floor. This was when he observed the light in the parking lot out in the yard. It was a light that kept shifting around and going off and on, about 4 to 5 feet off the ground and as large as 10 inches in diameter. It flashed in different places upon coming on, then would go off, etc. In all, it must have appeared 6, 7, 8 times. He did not count it. While at the movies in one car, the doctor's wife, with the elder son and wife, looked out the window to the heavens and observed what she felt might be a UFO hovering. She at the same time felt an anxiety for her husband back home with a desire to return. They stayed for the entire movie, although she expressed this desire to her son. In the other car, at the outside movie, sat the younger son and his girlfriend. For some unknown reason, the son's girlfriend was also picking up anxious feelings about the doctor during their time at the movies. Upon returning home, they found a badly shaken man who had encountered the MIB. The young men suggested they go out to observe the yard for any marks that might have been left. They observed both car tire marks there. Also, there was a strange mark for about 4 to 5 feet in the middle of the driveway. They didn't feel this was done by a car, since the other wheel would have had to have been too far to one side. Okay, so what do we think about this account?
Well, I mean, like, Maxwell might have, like, something, like, legitimate, but, like, since I have absolutely nothing to go with, I'm just gonna say, like, first of all, like,
maybe the younger son's girlfriend was pregnant.
It's actually last year, like, especially the pregnant lady, like, once everything starts gushing, like,
Maxwell, what are your thoughts on this?
I don't know.
Come on, like, join me on this.
Maybe the doctor's wife was also
I will
pregnant.
pay for your fucking vacation.
Maybe the doctor's wife was also pregnant, and that's why the MIB couldn't follow through on their threat, because he did talk about it. Although I guess
because you don't fuck with them. Like, I swear to God, like. This is for me. I'm a married man. Like, you don't fuck with them.
All right, so no thoughts, Maxwell?
No.
Okay,
I
so
was
let's move on to another MUFON witness report.
Son of a bitch.
Idaho, 1952. One winter night, as I was fast asleep in the west bedroom near the stairs, I was awakened by a strange pulsating hum. Sitting straight up, I turned to the left to see three ghostly figures materialize in the next room as they were approaching my bedside. Please remember that we had no electric and I had never been to a movie or heard a radio show to that point. Two of the creatures looked just like the gray aliens you see in the movies, and the one in the center was much taller and looked different. As they got closer, they told me to relax and to go back to sleep telepathically. Yeah, I could see that happening. The floating sensation. Imagine. You wake up and these three beings are like, yeah, everything's all cool. Just go back to sleep while we watch you. As they got
And then,
closer.
like, you see, like, this pregnant lady come out of the darkness.
Well, the floating sensation I felt helped stop my nervous shaking as I blacked out. The next morning, my grandmother met me halfway to the kitchen and asked if I was all right. She said that I had sunburn on the left side of my face and looked very tired. In the back seat of the new Buick on our way to the farm, I felt compelled to lay down on the floor with my back to the front seat. The telepathic message was like the one I received from the three ghosts. Moments after laying down, we T-boned another car on Route 13 near Blackbird. Everyone except I was seriously injured and taken to the hospital. The year, I believe, was 1959. While at the park, I noticed about 12 flying saucers to the west of the park. To my great surprise, I had a visit the next day while at my friend's house that lived around the corner from my...
I love the way that guy said it. It's just like, yeah, we were flying down, like, Route such and such, and, like, you know, by the way, there were, like, you know, like, this whole contingent of flying saucers, like, flying off to the side, like, you know, like, yeah, I mean, really, like, what the fuck? Like, I mean, like,
To my great surprise, I had a visit the next day while at my friend's home that lived around the corner from my grandparents' home. John's father answered the door to find two Air Force people in uniform asking to speak with me in private. My mother stood with the Air Force officer to my left, and the sergeant stood in front as another man entered the room dressed in black, wearing a hat and dark sunglasses. I was asked to tell what I saw as follows. I saw bright round objects, mostly in triangular groups of three flying in a manner not like any aircraft known. They were able to stop and turn on a dime when they departed to an altitude near space. They took off so fast that they appeared to vanish at about a 30-degree angle into space. For the next hour, the Air Force guys tried to get me to change my story, and I was growing tired of repeating myself. I then parroted back one of the officers' story as a way to make them leave. I noticed the officer look up at the guy in black for approval, as I could see the guy in black shake his head left and right. Now I knew I had to convince the guy in black and realized the officer was taking his orders from him. So I came up with a better idea that got the approval from the big boss in black. The man in black never said a word to me, even after asking him direct questions. He then folded his notebook and left, followed by my mother and the officer. There are many other strange stories about hard-to-believe events, but either you'll believe it or not will make no difference. This is my recorded statement, so others like me will take comfort in knowing they are not alone. What do we think of that incident?
well, at least, like, you know, like, it was just a guy in black and it wasn't a pregnant lady. But, like, I mean, like, so, like, beyond that, like, I can understand that to a certain extent. Like, people in black, like, I mean, like, obviously, like, I mean, I have no experience with this, but, like, at least he understood. I mean, like, the best friend.
Maxwell, any thoughts on that incident?
no.
You're probably still thinking about that pregnant lady snapping the neck of an alien.
Well, I mean, like, he understood who the supervisor was. Let's just put it that way. Like,
yeah.
I mean, it wasn't a pregnant lady. Like, you know, like, that would have been heavy duty. Like,
One of the definitive books on the Men in Black is The Mystery of the Men in Black, the UFO Silencer by Timothy Beckley. And there's an overview of quite a few cases, and Beckley actually speculates that men in black have been with humanity for hundreds of years. And these sightings go back to witchcraft and folklore during even the Elizabethan era. Native Americans described black men, and in the late 19th century, reports of malevolent traveling salesmen might have been manifestations of what are known as the Men in Black. And John Keel actually makes some interesting connections. You can check out my Mothman episode on the Men in Black. I actually go into a lot of major Men in Black cases in that podcast, which I won't repeat for this one. But he makes some very interesting connections, even to folklore, where some of these traveling salesmen that are Men in Black, and they're always in like Buicks or like some of these older cars, and some of these cars are described as having brand new interiors, yet they're 10 or 20 years out of date, but they're like completely shining and new, as if they have outdated models and they don't know it.
Yeah,
that's
Bruce,
that's
I
really
mean,
cool.
like, you know, like,
I didn't know they were disguised as salesmen. That's awesome.
Well, the other major thing is sometimes they'll go up to houses and ask for a drink of water as an excuse to get in the house and interview people or just look at people. It's very strange. I mean, that's an old fairy tale trick from hundreds of years ago, like of spirits or whoever of these spirit entities that just want a glass of water. They're usually some kind of trickster entities. What do you think about that, JR?
well, I mean, like, you know, like, I don't want to, like, you know, like, disrupt your podcast, Bruce, but, you know, like, you know, like, my wife, I mean, like, you know, like, I understand, like, you know, the aspect of a pregnant lady, and, like, if they show up to your door and they ask you to use your shitter, like, you know, you fucking let them, otherwise, like...
Well, let's keep in mind, let's get a timeline on this. So the
like,
Mothman...
it has nothing to do with, like, you know, being MIB, like, you know, like, they don't really give a shit about, like, you know, like, aliens or, like, spaceships or whatever. Like, you just say yes, otherwise there's, you know, like, there's a force to be reckoned with.
What time do you start drinking, JR? Because, like, it's not even 1 a.m. and you sound like you're really out of it.
Well, I mean, like, we're actually at, you know, like, but I'm not drinking.
I don't know what
like,
it
has nothing to do with, I'm just letting you know, like, you know.
So the Mothman of Point Pleasant, it stalked Point Pleasant from November 12th, 1966 to December 15th, 1967. And there were quite a few Men in Black cases within this Mothman phenomena that isn't talked about often. So the Mothman was, of course, a cryptid or monster or possibly alien or interdimensional creature that was cited by quite a few people in the West Virginia area of Point Pleasant. And once again, you can check out my Mothman podcast. It's pretty definitive and ongoing. But just where all this fits in Mothman lore, that those late 60s was where the Men in Black really made it into more into the mainstream of ufology. So let's go over another incident. This is the really bizarre case of Mr. O.H. Krill. So, Mr. Krill's writings first gained publicity in the late 1980s when a text
I
file...
actually know this case.
Yeah, it's really, really... I thought you might, because it has to do with the BBS.
Yeah, I get this case. Yeah.
When a text file called the Krill Papers was placed on the Paranet BBS, the file told the story of shadow governments in cooperation with gray aliens, secret underground bases, exchanges of human organs for alien technologies, and the like. He offered the following information on the Men in Black. All things considered, UFO research has become pretty much of a circus today, and the most intriguing and controversial sideshow skirting the edges is the question of the silencers, or the mysterious Men in Black. There is a strong subliminal appeal in these accounts of visits by mysterious, dark-suited figures. I have been visited myself, as have others I've known, attempting to silence UFO witnesses. A typical situation would be that a witness has a UFO sighting or UFO-related experience. Shortly thereafter, he is visited by one or more odd-looking men who relate to him the minutest details of his experience, even though he has as yet told no one, for fear of ridicule or other reasons. The men warn him about spreading the story of his experience around and sometimes even threaten him personally, sometimes obliquely, sometimes directly. Any evidence, if it exists, is confiscated in one way or another. Sometimes the visit is for some totally meaningless reason and the subject of UFOs is hardly mentioned, if at all. But again, The men all seem to look alike. We actually seem to find ourselves in close proximity to beings who obviously must be directly connected in some way with the objects themselves or the source behind them, yet they seem to be functioning unobtrusively within the framework of our own everyday existence. The classic conception of an MIB is a man of indefinite age, medium height, and dressed completely in black. He always has a black hat and often a black turtleneck sweater. They present an appearance often described as strange or odd. They speak in a dull, monotone voice like a computer and are dark, complected with high cheekbones, thin lips, pointed chin, and eyes that are mildly slanted. Interesting to note, though, in Mary Heyer, the journalist and reporter who covered the Mothman case and the UFO phenomena around Point Pleasant, West Virginia, during the Mothman sightings, she actually reported they were Asian looking as well, with darker skin. So there's quite a few different accounts of the Men in Black. The visitors themselves are often on absurd missions. They have reportedly posed as salesmen, telephone repairmen, or representatives from official or unofficial organizations. Their mode of transportation is usually large and expensive cars, Buicks or Lincolns, sometimes Cadillacs, all black, of course. I might note at this point that their physical appearance also has included beings that have pale grayish skin and that some of them have been seen to have blonde hair. Yet they wear the clothing and drive the cars previously described. Their cars often operate with the headlights off, but ghostly purple or greenish glows illuminate the interior. Unusual insignia have been seen emblazoned on the doors, and the license plates are always unidentifiable or untraceable. The fabric of their clothes has been described as strangely shiny or thin, but not silky, almost as if they have been cut from a new type of fabric. Their often mechanical behavior has caused them to be described by some as being like robots or androids. I mean, there's even some cases where there were wires or strange things. A lot of descriptions of some of these folks are pretty bizarre. A businessman's family in Wildwood, New Jersey, was visited by an unusually large man whose pant legs hiked up when he sat down, revealing a green wire grafted onto his skin and running up his leg. There are other cases of MIB appearing on the other side of a wet, muddy field after a heavy rain, but having no mud whatsoever on their brightly shined shoes, and in the bitter cold out of nowhere, wearing only a thin coat. Their shoes and wallets all seem new and hardly broken in. O.H. Krill's career was ended by John Lear when he made a television appearance with William Cooper. And I know you're familiar with both of those figures, JR. Lear was the son of a famous aviation engineer, heir to the Learjet Company. He claimed that his business connections with the military had given him access to secret Air Force documents related to UFOs. He had posted to Paranet his own UFO files, which were also full of secret alien government conspiracies. Cooper claimed to be a high-ranking naval intelligence officer, though records show that he was never anything more than an audiovisual technician for a Pacific Fleet briefing team. You know what's weird, though? Like, even in the case of Bob Lazar, if they were whistleblowing the government, how easy would it be for the government to, like, delete their existence from records? I mean, that wouldn't be that difficult, especially back then. It's not like there was a Google cache back then.
Yeah.
What do you think about that, Maxwell?
What?
Oh, man. Okay, so John Lear, another important note, Bill Cooper was actually one of the first researchers to frame all aliens being demons. Have you heard of that, JR?
Yeah.
You have?
Yeah, I have.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, like, you know, like, let's look at it. I think that it's very difficult to dispute, but it could have happened. You know what I mean? Like, you know, like, it's...
Bill Cooper was also one of the first to allege the whole hoax alien invasion being used to form one world government with all that jazz. What do you think about that, Maxwell?
Say it again.
Bill Cooper was one of the first people who claimed that aliens were simply demons, and that the governments of the world would use a fake hoax staged alien invasion using either Operation Bluebeam technology or some holographic technology to fake UFOs in an alien invasion in order to propagate one world government and bring in the New World Order.
Oh shit, that's a lot. But I didn't know he knew about Bluebeam project. That's kind of weird.
I don't know if he made reference to blue beam specifically, but he said there would be a hoax alien invasion. You got to focus on the important facts, Maxwell.
Oh shit. Yeah, that's well, I don't know. Like he had a lot of claims. I don't know that much about Bill Cooper, but I know he claimed to have time traveled and saw Jesus, right, or something like that. And then, but he also made some really cool predictions.
I'm
Like
not sure. I don't know if
I
he
think
said.
I
I
think
don't know.
Osama bin Laden, like
I
he
don't know.
predicted.
I don't know if he said that he did that himself. I think he said that they supposedly time traveled and got video of Jesus Christ during the
Oh
crucifixion.
yeah,
Have you heard about that, Jr.?
yeah,
Yeah.
You heard about that?
Yeah.
Have you seen that video, by the way?
I'm very impressed.
Okay, so let's get back to John Lear here. So Lear heard William Cooper use the O.H. Krill name, while John Lear wanted to use the show to announce that he made the O.H. Krill paper as a joke together with John Grace, head of the Nevada Aerial Research Organization. William Cooper went on to claim that he had first seen the Krill papers in the early 1970s while working for the Office of Naval Intelligence. John Lear immediately pulled William Cooper aside and quietly told him, Bill, O.H. Krill is a joke. Lear says that he and John Grace had used the name Krill from Bob Emenegger's Special UFOs It Has Begun. In the TV special, a woman claims to have channeled an entity named Krill. Cryll. They had posted the file on Paranet as a prank. William Cooper replied that Lear was mistaken. He said that Lear was a liar and continued to do so until the day he died. Is it a coincidence that John Lear's name is very close to liar? John Lear? Lear? I don't know. What about those dream factories on Mars? You think those are real, JR?
Well, I mean, like, like it's difficult to say. I mean, like, like
With John Lear and Bob Lazar were buddies too. Like Lear seems to be in a lot. Lear seems to intersect with a whole lot of people.
Lear is a really colorful individual.
Yeah, we need
that
to
has
do
a,
we'll do a dedicated
I
podcast to
think
John Lear. But
he's
okay,
he's a very colorful
yeah, we'll do a
individual.
dedicated podcast on him. So Cooper was known to accuse all who disagree with him of being agents working for the conspiracy. Note, on November 5th, 2001, Cooper was fatally shot by a law enforcement officer at his Eager, Arizona home after confronting deputies trying to arrest him and shooting one of them in the head. Authorities said the handgun-toting Cooper fled when Apache County deputies identified themselves and tried to arrest Cooper on charges of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon and endangerment stemming from earlier disputes with local residents. Federal authorities reported that Cooper spent years trying to avoid capture on a 1998 arrest warrant for tax evasion, and according to a spokesman for the U.S. Marshal Service, vowed he would not be taken alive. And we're not going to get into the circumstances of his death, although I would be interested in hearing JR's opinion on that, but we'll save that for another podcast again because we're talking Men in Black here. Lear and Grace did
Okay.
not Lear and Grace did not pull the Krill files entirely out of thin air. It was really a satire of the most extreme and bizarre UFO stories that circulated among the circles of UFO enthusiasts. If the descriptions of MIB are not directly from real stories of alleged witnesses, they at least bear a resemblance to some of the weirdest accounts. And many people did not believe in the Krill files for a long time. Copies of the files are still to be found on the internet. These files have had an influence on the public perception of the Men in Black legend and have almost certainly affected popular culture. So what do we think of the O.H. Krill papers? Was it simply a prank, or were they real and then debunked as a prank in order to not have them taken legitimately? Maxwell, JR, thoughts?
I got nothing.
What a shocker, JR.
Well, I mean, I think that like, they are like regarded as something. I mean, like I don't have a lot of personal experience like regarding this, but there is a certain subject matter that exists for this. You know what I mean? So
I mean, it seems if the Krill papers are legitimate, which by the way, I'm not saying they are, but if they're legitimate, it would stand to reason that if you wanted to debunk them, you would just say it was satire because they are using elements from known cases. So if the known cases were true, that seems to be a good way to debunk it. That being said, once again, I haven't seen any hard evidence that it would be completely legitimate either. It's kind of an up in the air thing, like a lot of things in ufology. So John Keel's book, of course, the 1975 book, The Mothman Prophecies, it's one of the most definitive books on the paranormal in general, not just aliens or MIB. And of course, John Keel believed that a lot of these experiences, these paranormal experiences, were based on the observer or the witness, and that the witness had to be studied themselves. He believed that there could be these ultra-terrestrial entities messing with your mind. So they're using information in your own mind to create this reality that's your perception. So once again, if there's actual physical evidence at the site of the encounter, that's different, because then that would corroborate that something really happened. But he believed that goes all the way back to the ancient folklore from hundreds or even thousands of years ago, with these trickster type entities just messing with people. Because like a lot of these UFO or Men in Black encounters, people have like ancient Greek names or Egyptian or Greek type looking letters or hieroglyphs. What do you think about that, JR? Do you think that could be a possibility, or have you not really examined that aspect of the paranormal?
Well, I haven't exactly examined like that aspect, but I think it could be possible. I mean, you know what I mean? You know, like it could be possible. There are various aspects that point to that, but you know, I don't know. I mean, you know, like I just not my area of expertise.
Maxwell, any thoughts on that?
Got nothing, man.
All right, so let's wrap this up with a couple of more strange MIB cases. There is Robert Richardson of Toledo, Ohio, who in July 1967 informed the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, APRO, that he had collided with a UFO while driving at night. Coming round a bend, he had been confronted by a strange object blocking the road. Unable to halt in time, he had hit it, although not very hard. Immediately on impact, the UFO vanished. Police who accompanied Richardson to the scene could find only his own skid marks as evidence, but on a later visit, Richardson himself found a small lump of metal which might have come from the UFO. 3 days later, at 11 p.m., two men in their 20s appeared at Richardson's home and questioned him for about 10 minutes. They did not identify themselves, and Richardson, to his own subsequent surprise, did not ask who they were. They were not unfriendly, gave no warnings, and just asked questions. He noted that they left in a black 1953 Cadillac. Men in Black really like Cadillacs, huh? The number.
Well, I mean, as an American, I mean, like you know, like as in you know, like I mean, like you know, government American cars. I mean, you know, come on.
The number, when checked, was found not yet to have been issued. A week later, Richardson received a second visit from two different men who arrived in a current model Dodge.
Yeah. Surprise, surprise.
They wore black suits and were dark complexioned. Although one spoke perfect English, the second had an accent, and Richardson felt there was something vaguely foreign about them. At first, they seemed to be trying to persuade him that he had not hit anything at all. But then they asked for the piece of metal. When he told them it had gone for analysis, they threatened him. If you want your wife to stay as pretty as she is, then you'd better get the metal back. Maybe they've been watching mafia movies. The existence of the metal was known only to Richardson and his wife, and his wife must have not been pregnant.
No,
and the existence of the metal was known only to Richardson and his wife and to two senior members of APRO. Seemingly, the only way the strangers could have learned of its existence would be by tapping either his or APRO's telephone. There was no clear connection between the two pairs of visitors, but what both had in common was access to information that was not freely and publicly available. Very interesting. There's also a case of a man who had supposedly taken a shot at a humanoid. November 1961, Paul Miller and three companions were returning home to Minot, North Dakota, after a hunting trip when what they could only describe as a luminous silo landed in a nearby field. At first, they thought it was a plane crashing, but had to revise their opinion when the plane abruptly vanished. As the hunters drove off, the object reappeared and two humanoids emerged from it. Miller panicked and fired at one of the creatures, apparently wounding it. The other hunters immediately fled. On their way back to Minyat, all of them experienced a blackout and lost 3 hours. Terrified, they decided not to report the incident to anyone. Yet the next morning, when Miller reported to work in an Air Force office, 3 men in black arrived. They said they were government officials, but showed no credentials, and remarked unpleasantly they hoped Miller was telling the truth about the UFO. How did they know about it? We have a report, they said vaguely. They seemed to know everything about me, where I worked, my name, everything else, Miller said. They also asked questions about his experiences as if they already knew the answers. Miller did not dare tell his story for several years. Does that one sound legitimate? Maxwell?
I don't know.
JR? JR?
I do. I mean, like, I think it does. I mean, like,
That one's easy to explain, though, because if he worked for the Air Force, they could just get his file. And if they had a report of the UFO from someone else or some Air Force monitoring, that one doesn't seem as strange to me as some of these other ones.
I mean, yeah, no, like, keep in mind, like, government has, like, detailed files on, like, everything you do. So, I mean, like,
All right, so here's for our last case, we are going to China because Men in Black are not unique to Western or European countries, to the Western world. So this is where it's going to get really, really strange. Chinese UFO investigator Shi Bo has uncovered a story that, while far from dramatic, raises some interesting questions concerning the exact nature of the MIB phenomenon. For while UFOs, and to a lesser extent MIB, have been long part of American folklore, they have only until recently been a taboo subject in mainland China. When this set of circumstances is taken into consideration, with the fact that the witness in this case was a 6-year-old boy, we may justifiably find ourselves wondering how such an event should occur in the complete absence of a cultural point of reference, assuming, of course, that the existence of MIB is not an objective reality. In the 1983 book, China and Extraterrestrials, he relates the story of Li Jingyang, who as a 6-year-old boy in Yangguan Shanxi province in May 1963 had an encounter with a UFO. The day after Li had seen a shining silvery disc hanging in the sky while at play with his friends, he was stopped in the street by a very tall man dressed entirely in black. The man, while pointing to the exact spot where Li had seen the disc, inquired as to whether the boy had seen anything unusual in the sky recently. Li responded that indeed he had, which elicited from the strange man a warning never to tell anyone else what he had seen. The MIB then went around a corner and seemingly disappeared. Lee claims this encounter was witnessed by several others who all noted and discussed the stranger's odd mechanical movements with his automated sounding voice and the fact that his lips did not move when he spoke. Thus, in its effort to keep the disc sighting of Li Jingyang a secret, the MIB succeeded only in making a spectacle of itself.
so, I mean, is the MIB just American government, or is it also, like, is it unified extraterrestrial government?
Well, some people think that the MIB are aliens themselves. So, and they're just posing as government. And this is all part of some strange experiment we know nothing about. Some people think that they're androids or cyborgs or whatever created by US governments or possibly by the aliens themselves to kind of blend in, threaten. It seems strange though, because if they just want to silence everybody, I mean, is that really the way to go about it? And if they have the technology to keep people from doing it by inducing headaches or whatnot, why the need to create the spectacle, either for the subject or for? I mean, it's all very strange, don't you think,
Yes.
Maxwell?
Yeah, it's change.
So do you think there's some kind of a long-term play here, or is it some kind of super long-term conspiracy to make it look like they don't want people knowing about aliens or extraterrestrials or UFO activity as a byproduct, leading more credence to it, where the conspiracy or the cover-up almost proves the
Well,
legitimacy?
maybe not. But, like, if not, they should watch Rob Sterling's, if not, they should watch Rob Sterling. Rob Sterling. I mean, like, after all, like,
What the fuck you talking about? You know what's weird? Like I mean, if Men in Black exists to kind of, well, I actually don't know why it exists, or if, I mean, even if it does, but like if it's, well, this is actually from the movie, so like the movie series Men in Black with
With
Will
Will
Smith.
Smith?
Yeah, like they pretty much, the Men in Black existed. Well, they're all humans, and well, actually most of them, but they exist to protect humans from the shock of aliens being in their world. But I'm just saying, like, I think humans can handle it. I think humans can handle, oh shit, we've had aliens from, thousands of years on this planet,
Some
and
people,
they've been
some pe-
living among us. And I don't think it's that big of a deal. I think people will just accept it, and I think it will be all right. I mean, if that is the purpose, and if that is, but I don't know what the purpose is. So
some people believe that those movies were just made to almost discredit and make everybody think that the Men in Black and aliens were just silly and make it look ridiculous with a comedy, and
mm.
that's what some people think.
Oh, I see. To back off from the whole
Just to
the
make it all seem like ridiculous, like all conspiracy
mm.
theory nonsense. And
Okay, well, in the Men in Black, they're kind of like heroes of the humanity. So
yeah, the Men in Black movies. What do you think about those movies, JR? Those are accurate portrayals of a government agency.
at a certain point. But I mean, like, Hollywood has a certain perspective. I wouldn't say that that's the ultimate perspective.
So yeah, as I was saying before, like a lot of people think that the Men in Black are just, if they're part of some kind of long-term hoax, or they're just trickster spirits that have been around forever and they're manifesting in their current form to reflect the people witnessing them by using the information in the people's own heads. What do you think what do you think about that?
Asking me.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like, like, what wouldn't be? I mean, like, like, yeah, it's part of the part what is being put in people's heads. But it's also like what being spread around. So I mean, like, it's both.
Some people actually think the US government had no clue who the Men in Black were, and there's quite a bit of evidence to this as well. In 1967, the United States Air Force expressed concerns about finding out more about these guys in black who were going around scaring people while claiming to be from the US Armed Services. So here's a statement by Colonel George P. Freeman, the spokesperson for Project Blue Book at the Pentagon. Mysterious men dressed in Air Force uniforms or all in black bearing impressive credentials from government agencies have been silencing UFO witnesses. We have checked the number of these cases, and these men are not connected to the Air Force in any way. We haven't been able to find out anything about these men. By posing as Air Force officers and government agents, they are committing a federal offense. We sure would like to catch one. Unfortunately, the trail is always too cold by the time we hear about these cases, but we are still trying. Assistant Vice Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force Lieutenant General Hewitt T. Wheelis sent a memo on March 1st, 1967 to various agencies in the Department of Defense. Here's what it said. Information not verifiable has reached HQ USAF that persons claiming to represent the Air Force or other defense establishments have contacted citizens who have sighted unidentified flying objects. In one reported case, an individual in civilian clothes who represented himself as a member of NORAD demanded and received photos belonging to a private citizen. In another, a person in an Air Force uniform approached local police and other citizens who had sighted a UFO, assembled them in a schoolroom, and told them that they did not see what they thought they saw, and that they should not talk to anyone about the sighting. All military and civilian personnel, and particularly information officers and UFO investigating officers who hear of such reports, should immediately notify their local OSI offices.
I'm not, Bruce. I'm not gonna disclose. I'm not.
Okay, well, my only point on that is that if it was another government agency that was more clandestine than the U.S. Air Force or some of these other agencies that are saying this, they would not be privy to that information. So the Men in Black could potentially still be from the government.
Maybe not.
Yeah, exactly. We don't know. So, or some people think that if it was aliens or whoever, interdimensional entities of some kind, they're playing these games, then they thought posing as the government would be the easiest way to intimidate these witnesses. So they really weren't
Perhaps.
from the U.S. Or it could be a combination of both. Once again, we don't want to fall for any black and white fallacies. There could be a combination of both going on. That might be the most likely scenario, right?
Perhaps.
And that's obviously if aliens exist and if the Men in Black exist. We don't know anything for sure, but this is MindShock, and we always go down every avenue. So once again, thank you for joining us. If you enjoy the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel, hit the bell for notifications, and if you like this podcast, hit the like button. Feel free to chime in with comments on your thoughts on the Men in Black or any other podcast you want to hear or subjects covered. And of course, check out our social media sites, Facebook, Reddit, Twitter, and Patreon. Just check the link in the description. This is Bruce McGuire signing off.
And Maxwell Powers.
And Jared tapping out.
We'll see you guys again next time. Thanks for listening.